Okay, with Cory David Bortnicker, My Name Is Jonas is the screenplay. He's a winning screenplay from the LGBTQ plus film festival. But this is just more than that. I want to read to the synopsis because it's got multiple genres in one sentence. So it's a young gay songwriter in the grip of a meth addiction. He must face his past when he learns he's actually a prophet who must save New York City from Judgment Day. There's a lot going on in that one sentence.
Yeah, there is. I mean, it's a complex story, but it's also a fairly straightforward story. My Name is Jonas is a fundamentally it's a story about addiction and recovery. We've seen a lot of great addiction and recovery stories out there, but almost none that have dealt with meth addiction, specifically in the gay community.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to do was to tell a story about a character who's experiencing some of the symptoms of meth addiction, which primarily include a lot of psychosis, and to tell that story in a unique way. There's a lot of different sort of things happening genre-wise, but principally this is a story about addiction and recovery and one person's journey through that experience.
That's a great answer. And you're using this genre, this kind of tone to tell that story, kind of tell that entertaining story.
Yeah, and as a person who, this the story is partially autobiographical, and as a person who has sort of been in the trenches of both addiction and recovery, something that often gets lost in addiction stories is some of the darkly comedic aspects of what it's really like to be an addict and to be someone in recovery. So something I've aspired to do with this script and with this story is to tell a heartfelt and realistic story about addiction, but also to do it in a way that is entertaining and acknowledges some of the insanity and the sort of entertaining aspects of the experience.
So semi-autobiographical, so that means you're a prophet.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but what I wanted to do and sort of the journey of this story is to take the story, the Book of Jonah, which is one of the oldest legends really in human literature. The Book of Jonah
Yeah.
is a story that's from the Old Testament, it's from the Bible, thousands of years old. And about this figure who's a prophet, but who doesn't want to be a prophet. He's sort of this unique anti-hero. He's one of the first anti-heroes, arguably, in human literature.
Mhm.
And I thought that a lot of folks who have experienced meth addiction have a lot of, like I mentioned, psychosis, a lot of which includes sort of religious psychosis. A lot of people who believe that they have supernatural sort of experiences. Certainly, psychiatrists and people from the medical establishment would, not inaccurately say, "Hey, that's because you're on drugs." However, I think it's interesting that, back in the, thousands of years ago, people who had these kinds of experiences may not have been considered sick. They may have been considered, prophetic. And I think that's an interesting tension between what, contemporary society is willing to explore and what we're not. So this script is attempting to, take a figure who's certainly having a drug-induced experience,
Yeah.
but truly believes he's having a religious experience and trying to explore where there might be some crossover.
Yeah. It's funny that you could mention that because it's all about the lens of where we are in today's society. So somebody who's in a who's homeless in an urban city is spewing lines. They may be the genius of our time, right? But nobody knows because it's just that we just don't live in a world where they can be listened to.
Exactly. And I think, there's something, you know, we've lost something, I think, in our insistence on, proving everything scientifically and having, a logical answer for every
Yeah.
question. A question I have is, are we losing something about, sort of the wonder and awe of this sort of human experience because we've become so insistent on having sort of scientific understanding about everything that occurs in our world. And so with the script, and with all, I think, great literature is just trying to ask questions about like, what else is possible? What might we be missing?
Yeah.
What could we learn from people whose experiences are radically different from our own?
That said, to be fair, we've also learned about the human psychology, like psychosis and emotion, and even addiction, right? Where someone like myself, it's like I can't have a drink because then I'm going to have 20 drinks. It's just something that's part of my DNA, right? But and then they would call people would call me weak or like a loser in a different time. Now there's an understanding of that addiction, right? That it's not my fault, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because you asked earlier, am I a prophet? Is this character a
Yeah,
prophet? Well, what is a prophet other than just someone who has an important message to transmit to the world? And I think that people who are addicts or alcoholics who have overcome that affliction have really learned a lot. It's a, science tells us that this is a chronic disease that impacts, the brain in a very serious way. And for people who have found a way to overcome that, they have knowledge, they have wisdom that the rest of the world could really benefit from, then they may not learn about because they're not in, a specific recovery program. So another thing that I want to express in this script is that there is a lot of wisdom and a lot of learning
yeah,
that characters who are addicts can share with the world, particularly nowadays. Like everyone's an addict now to their smartphones,
yeah.
to their technology. We live in an age, at least here in the West, that is like highly addicted. And so, if a character in a script can help unlock some recovery wisdom for the general audience, is that not prophetic in its own way?
Yeah. I always felt that food is the under estimated addiction. A lot of people have food addictions. That's not
Yeah,
talked
I
about.
mean, I guess you could be addicted to almost anything. I think, obviously, in this script, this is a story about a meth addict, and meth
Yeah.
addiction is a pretty serious one.
But it's more about like what makes you like it's of course it's a general thing, but what makes you worse as a human being, I guess. It's like a general summary of addiction, right? So because sometimes there's good addiction, right? It's just like but not to sound corny, but it's all about balance, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And again, looking back to sort of the inspiration for the story, the Book of Jonah, the character of Jonah, sort of his defining quality is that he goes the other way. That God comes to him with this mission, and Jonah is like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go do this other thing. He's this figure who's running away,
Yeah.
and addiction is often called like a running away disease. It's characterized by sort of not facing reality,
Yeah.
wanting to escape. And so that's something else that I wanted to explore in the
Yeah,
script.
there's a lot of that, of course, in addiction. So, but the question in the film is that there's Judgment Day. There's like he must say he's a prophet. So you have to wonder is this from his imagination? Is this from his perspective, or is this kind of what is actually happening? So if you're directing the film, you're kind of if you show it from his point of view, then the audience picks up that maybe it's not even real, right? Or if you show it from like a bird's eye point of view, then this is really
Yeah.
happening. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it's great observation. And like I said, one of the central questions that the script explores is, is this character is Jonas having a legitimate spiritual experience, or is he just crazy?
Yeah.
Um, the story, we do show that he is it is a legitimate experience, at least for him, right? At least for him, it's legitimate. But he's always running up against these people who essentially tell him that no, you're not having this experience. You're just on drugs. This is just the drugs. And so for him, he's sort of conflicted and how to navigate that tension.
Gotcha. So then, so basically, you kind of like touched like before is that, so this is kind of personal for you in a sense, right? Where like that people used it as excuse, say you have an observation, it's like, oh, you're just on drugs.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is the story. A great amount of it is based on my own experience as a person who was addicted to crystal meth for a very long time, who's been in a lot of detoxes and rehabs, and I've had Experiences like a lot of people in addiction that seem sort of difficult to explain and sometimes spiritual. And I certainly wanted to use that as sort of the framework to explore the story. So the script that I wrote that we're talking about is a pilot episode for what I would like to pitch as a series.
Yeah.
I also shot and directed a short film version of.
Oh, did you? Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And we've actually just gotten into a few film festivals that I'm really excited about. So we've got a short film version of the script that's going to be out in the festival circuit.
What's it
Uh,
called?
the short film is also called My Name Is Jonas.
Okay.
And I can tell you right now, we're premiering at the Out South Film Festival, August 9th in Durham, North Carolina. That's where we're going to be making our premiere. We've got a couple other selections to festivals that are coming out soon. Once I can announce them, I will.
Yeah.
And in addition to the short film and this script, I'm also working on the story as a novel right now because I think, that's another way to get the story out there. So I want to get the story out there. In which format it takes, I'm kind of, open to, whether it's, the short film is out there.
Yeah.
The script for the pilot, I want to shop around, and the novel's in process now.
Because I was looking at I was like, we have like a database where I typed your name in, and you submitted last year, and your script was 159 pages long. I'm assuming that was a feature.
Yeah, that was that was a feature back when I was like trying to figure out what the hell is this story, and
Yeah.
it was after that experience where I realized this is much too large to be a feature film, the story. And so that's when I sort of pivoted and explored, okay, how could this live as a series? At first I thought maybe a limited series, and so that's why I eventually pivoted and turned it into a pilot episode for this series,
The
which is
point I'm
now.
making is that you answer the question. You're figuring out. I brought it up because you're figuring out the story, which a lot of people have to do. You got to figure out where it's placed. Like, yeah, 159 pages is long. Is a big, it's a long screenplay, right? So
Yeah, it's like the new like Kevin Costner films that are out there. Yeah, so much of this process of this project, which I started about a year and a half ago, was just figuring out like what is the story? What is this story? And I spent almost 9 months figuring that out. The first stab I took was a feature screenplay. It was super long. It was like, yeah, this is not this is, I know the story has to be like this because again, like I'm adapting this story of the Book of Jonah, which has a very definitive beginning, middle, and an end. And so I know what the story is, and so figuring out the right format for the story was half the battle. But the good thing was that in writing the screenplay, which again was excessively long, it I figured out kind of what the arc is, right?
mhm.
Now I know what the arc of the story is, which has been useful in trying to write the novel now. So because I got kind of the major beats figured out.
Gotcha. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you also acted in the film as well, for the short film.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So for the short film, My Name Is Jonas, I wrote, directed, and acted in
Wow. So you're a triple threat, I guess, in a sense. Well, you're a busy man.
Yeah, it's been really great, and I'm super excited to get the short out there. The short I think does a really nice job of just setting up the story in it's 10 and a half minutes. We meet Jonas on his first day in rehab. He's talking about, he's telling the other people in rehab that he thinks he's a prophet. We're flashing back to seeing the first day that he used drugs, when he used meth, as
Mhm.
well as the day that he meets God in this motel room. So we're sort of, jumping from timelines, all built around his little soliloquy in rehab.
And it says that also in the blog interview, it said that you're a musician and a songwriter. And then if people are watching this on video, they can see that you're also a painter as well.
Yeah, I've got my little piano over there too. So yeah, I like to make things. It's if I'm not making things, then I'm miserable. So it's sort of what I have to do.
Well, you're too busy to do math because you have too much going on, right? So,
You'd be surprised, right? Yeah,
sorry, I hope you appreciated that joke, but it was like, but it's like,
yeah.
but your film, your script, sorry, has that dark kind of humor to it, right? It's funny. Your script is funny
Yeah, I mean,
to some, right? So yeah.
yeah, look, like I said before, there's sort of I think it's called, gallows humor, sort of, if you've been in the trenches of addiction, and you've survived to tell the tale, you have to laugh about it sometimes. And, some of the behaviors and experiences that are specific to meth addiction are frankly hilarious. There's a lot of kind of compulsive activity, whether you're taking apart, radios, sexual compulsivity, there's all kinds of behaviors that are really specific to sort of tweakers. And it can be funny. And rehab is funny too. Rehabs are wacky places. And so there's a lot of material to dig.
I'm sure you've been asked this question before, but I have to ask it. What did you think of Breaking Bad?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the greatest shows ever. Terrific show. I think it does an amazing job of exploring. Yeah, I mean, Walter White's kind of, I mean, a iconic person. I think that show does a really interesting job of showing what drug trafficking and manufacturing,
Yeah.
is like, which is not my experience,
No, but it also shows the addiction kind of, well, not as much, but obviously they're showing the distribution, of course, but they're also showing the addiction of meth affinity too, right? So,
Yeah, and what I'm working on, like the story that I am working on is, the impact that crystal meth has on the individual
yeah,
and that person's friends and family
of
specifically.
course, yeah. But
Yeah.
but I'm saying that because you what your experience, I'm sure you've been asked that like it's a show about meth addiction, right? So just
Yeah, and and really there haven't been too many other films or TV shows about meth addiction. There was Beautiful Boy that came out, which is an amazing book and a
Mhm.
good film too. But um, there's been very few, if any, work done around meth addiction, specifically in the gay community, which is a lot of people don't know, but like meth addiction in the gay community has been a scourge for over 2 decades. We rarely hear people talk about it, and so that's another, another big thing that's important to me is to get the story out there for that community.
Do you know why that is? Is there like a simple answer or
Um, that's really what I'm exploring in the work, and like, I mean, a simple answer, like, being growing up gay is not easy,
yeah.
for people. And sure, things have changed and we live in a much more tolerant world, but the impact that that has on people is profound. And a lot of specifically gay men and trans people turn to crystal meth because they're looking for connection. They're lonely, they're looking for connection, and there's a world of crystal meth use where people can find that. And I mean, I think the drug has its history coming out of the AIDS epidemic when a lot of men were going through, horrific experiences, and the drug came on the scene and offered people a way to feel good about their lives. And it sort of has persisted over, 2 decades. There's a lot of good work out there that has explored this issue. There's a couple good books that are out there, but it hasn't been, there hasn't been a singular story that's told the gay meth story out there, and I'm hopeful that I'll get the opportunity to help tell that story with this project.
No, I think I love the way the approach that you took because I have a very personal um interest in addiction like scripts, like what I do for a living, my experiences. So I take personal interest into it. And I never believe there's maybe a few good films about addiction, but bringing back Breaking Bad or other films, usually it's like showing someone's addicted, but it's also showing the kingpin and like the cartel, all that stuff, right? That doesn't but basically, so it's because it's sad, right? So to see somebody, and I never really felt that many films have really got it either. They never got it. They never, like,
Yeah,
you're a director, you have a personal point of view, so then you can tell that story. I always felt that some directors didn't. You can tell they didn't have that point of view, and you can see it in the film. But that's my personal opinion. So and then
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I agree. I think you know, if you have addiction, or if there's someone in your life who has addiction, like, just how horrible it is, just how, like, it's like banging your head against the wall, or seeing your best friend or your loved one like banging their head against the wall repeatedly, and no one can stop it. It's um, and it doesn't just happen out of nowhere, right? Addiction is sort of the culmination of a series of events in someone's life that gets them there. And so what I want to do with this story is to trace the journey of, an otherwise sort of typical kid growing up, and how does he get to this place where, his life is, he's this sort of, psychotic mess. What are the factors at play that can propel a person to that place? What's the impact that it has on their friends and their family, on their parents, on their best friend? To really, like, take a magnifying glass up to what it's like to be a drug addict. And yes, sometimes it's funny, but bottom line, it's a horrible disease,
Yeah.
that's ravaging, the country. So I hope that I can tell an authentic story. Again, it's based on my experience. So the best I can do is just be true to what my own experience was, and have faith that, as long as I'm true to what I've experienced, that I'm telling the truth. And that's what I want to do. I want to tell the truth, in all of its sort of ugliness and patheticness, that I can.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the angle that you've taken to do this is genius, in my opinion. It's a really good way. It's a really good take, because you're entertaining the audience, but then and then maybe they'll learn something along the way. But it's like that's what you're not trying to tell them what to think. You're just basically telling an entertaining story, but there's something very profound in what you're saying. So it's
Thanks.
not
Thank
easy
you.
to
That's
do.
that's
Yeah.
encouraging.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's encouraging.
Yeah. It's not easy to do it all. So I'd love to see your short, and I wish you all the best of luck with this
Yeah,
project.
thank you.
And it's smart to do the proof of concept and show people context of what the tone is, because that's what it's about. It's a unique point of view, like I said. So having an actual film shows them that, right? So
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your
anytime,
time and
yeah.
chat.
But let me know how everything goes with the film and everything, because I think this is a good, really good script. So love to see it.
Thank you
Love
so
to see it
much.
take off.
So great to meet you.
Thanks.